Welcome to Old Classic Car, and in this compilation we are looking at modified classics. So to begin with, here is my old 2.5 litre Triumph Spitfire Mark III. This was a much modified car that I bought in about 1993 or 1994 I think it was. There you can see the 2.5 litre engine set about a foot further back in the chassis for improved weight distribution, and that car went like a rocket. I bought it part done and finished the job off. Here it was in our road where we used to live after a slight malfunction with the front wheel. Probably talk about a little bit more in a future video, but that was a lot of fun. It's still out there somewhere, that particular car, albeit with a regular 4-cylinder engine now. Now we're down at Bewley, and here is one of the incredible outspan advertising oranges based on a Mini, a very modified Mini no less. This one registered in late 1972 or early 1973. Who remembers ever seeing one of these back in the 1970s? Several were built, I believe. Okay, thanks to Stephen for this particular photograph, and we've got a Mark I Austin A40, a mildly modified A40 Mark I there, YHJ560. According to DVLA, it's still got the 948cc engine in it, but clearly a number of subtle modifications on this particular car. And this is a barn find Ford Model Y, the Ford 8 of the early to mid 1930s. It looks fairly standard until you look at the wheels. Those are pop wheels, so I'm guessing this particular Ford 8 has been updated to maybe 103E Ford pop axles, hence the pop wheels. And staying on the side valve Ford theme for a moment, here we're on the front at Llandudno. We've got an E83W here, the Ollie's Musical Extravaganza. I believe there is an organ built into the back there, and they're also often performing puppets, so this is a very modified little E83W. I think the original body was in New Zealand, made in New Zealand. Okay, we're off to an evening car meet now, and a subtly modified Jaguar XK140 fixed head coupe, debumpered, leather bonnet straps, extra Lucas lights on the front as well. What a great looking car that is. Carrying on this look at modified classics, we have a two-tone Rover P4, but this P4 hides a secret because beneath that bonnet it has a 3.5 litre Rover V8 engine. I can't remember if this one has a manual or auto gearbox, but I'm sure that rolls along very well indeed. Wonder when it was last on the road. Okay, we're off to one of our regular haunts, one of the breakfast meets that we go to on a fairly regular basis, and here we have a very modified Jaguar S-Type. It has Mini-Lite style wheels, again leather straps on the bonnet, which is de rigueur for any tweaked Jaguar it would seem. This is a 1966 car. Now we're at Tatton Park many years ago, I think this was 2006 for the Stars and Stripes, and we have a stretched 1957 Chevrolet Limousine 5.7 litre car. This one has been repainted in more recent years. If you do a search for that registration on Google Images, you'll see the car as it is now. But yeah, certainly eye-catching. Now we're down to the NEC, and staying with eye-catching cars, we have this, a 1965 Herald hatchback, a prototype for a hatchback version of the Triumph Herald. Look at the different rear side window treatments side to side. You can just see the other one through the window there. So yeah, two different styling proposals in one car. Now we're down at Bicester Heritage, and a subtly modified Series 2 Jaguar E-Type. It's a 2+2 with Wolf Race alloy wheels. Very much a 1970s mod, and they do seem to suit it pretty well, I think. Now this is a real oddball that I went to go and have a look at many years ago now. This is a Triumph Gloria, pre-war Gloria, but if you look at those wings, they are off a Riley RM. It's got a very unusual one-off bonnet as well, with exterior rear hinges, rear-mounted hinges, so that's quite an unusual car. Later axles possibly as well. I think it has been converted back to standard now. And here, a really smart example of a four-door Volvo 122S. This was on a classic car road run a few years ago. Nice set of Mini-Lite wheels on that one. Nice two-tone paint job as well, and very unusual wing mirrors as well. So just a few subtle modifications on this one. And there is my old Morris Minor. That was a 1952 Morris Minor MM, one of the highlight MMs, and this one had been upgraded to a later A-Series engine. These originally had the side valve engine that was fitted to the Morris 8 Series E, and the Series 2 introduced the A-Series engine, but that was a later car than this one. I had to include this one. We're at Morton Hampstead Motor Museum, and a very, very modified Austin Healey Sprite Mark 1. If you haven't seen that museum video yet, I recommend going to have a look at that one, because we have a closer look at this incredible Frog Eye Sprite. So many modifications on there. It's almost worth pausing the video just to try and take them all in. Look at those little fins. How incredible is that? And those wheels with the spinners in the middle, the groovy paint job as well. Many, many modifications, extra lights, badges and so on. The Beetle alongside, which came from the same home I believe, is similarly adorned, and that'll feature later in this video. Okay, we're over at Alton Park now for the US Auto Show, and one of many, many modified half-ton pickup trucks on display. This one a Chevrolet from 1957, presumably on air suspension and dropped to the floor for the purposes of display, but I don't think you'd get off the field if you left it at that height. And this was over in North Wales just a year or two back, a Datsun 240Z, a really stunning looking car. I do like these a lot. Slightly lowered suspension, bigger wheels, are they compomotive perhaps, alloy wheels, and finished in grey. So that's a very cool looking car, I think. Let me know in the comments what you think of some of these modified classics. Okay, Ute 480H, that's the next one. This is a 3-litre MGC, and looking around online, this one's seen a fair bit of competitive use, and it started out life with the Lancashire Police Force apparently. So it's certainly had quite the life, this particular car. And down at the NEC, who remembers these? This one has been fitted with a period boot conversion, this little Mini, and that's like a fiberglass appendage that you could bond or bolt on to the back of your Mini to give you a much larger boot space. A bit ungainly looking, but certainly unusual, and hopefully this one will be restored with that still in place. And there is the BMW Z3 that we used to run several years ago before the MX-5 came along. This was a 2.8, it'd been lowered, bigger wheels, and yeah, it really handled and sounded fantastic, but handled really well. It stuck to the road like glue, and it was, yeah, really nice car. And here, this was one of my favourite cars at Bicester Heritage last year, the XJ12 Series 1. But a Series 1 with a difference, because this was Silverstone fire tender, and it has a manual gearbox, which is something you normally only see in some of the V12 E-types, the Series 3s. The XJ12s were all automatic as a rule. Now, a very modified car here. I think this probably started out as a Hillman Superminx estate, but it's been cut and shut and modified, and judging by those wheels, I think it's used for a bit of drag racing now. So I wonder what the story is with that particular car. But yeah, very modified classic indeed. And many modified cars are used in historic racing, of course, so I've included a few of them in this particular upload, although most of the cars are road cars. We've got a much modified twin-cam MGA Roadster here, the cut-down screen, big wheels, possibly off a TR6 maybe, and opened up grille as well, so yeah, quite a cool looking car. And how about this? I think this was probably used in a film somewhere, early 1960s, Moscovich 403, looking a little bit mouldy, but that's a really interesting old car. This one turned up at the Combermere meet. I think this was not that long ago actually, and it's got a flip front, this particular Mini, hiding a Honda VTEC engine of all things. What an incredible conversion that is. Flip the bonnet down and you could tell it was a modified Mini, but just not quite how modified until the bonnet was raised. Incredible. Now we've got a little MG midget here with one of those fastback fiberglass roofs. I think this is probably an Ashley roof, although there were others available as well, like the Heron and such versions like that, but I think this is Ashley, produced by Ashley Laminates. And what do we have here? This is a silver Pontiac Silver Streak of 1938. The registration, if you need to know it, is HXF817. What an incredible car that is. This was at Carfest a few years ago. Don't forget to like and subscribe if these videos are of interest to you. And here, I wonder what the story is with this one. The DVLA shows this still with the original engine size, but I'm sure this has seen quite a lot of modifications under the body. This particular car is a Renault Dauphine. We are down at Brooklands for this particular scene, and we have a slightly modified Dad's Army spec, Home Guard spec, Austin 7 van, complete with those period headlamp masks that were de rigueur during the blackout years in the Second World War. How about this? A Citroen H van. So many of these H vans and other vans similar to them have been converted into catering vehicles, and that's the case with this brightly coloured hot dog van. There's a very similar Citroen behind it as well. These were produced for many, many years, well until I think the early 1980s. And we are back at Carfest, this time at Cholmondeley Castle, and Ram 20M, that's quite an unusual shooting brake conversion undertaken in fairly recent years, I think, to a Lotus Elan Plus 2. Quite an interesting looking car, a lot of work's gone into that one. Now we're down at Race Retro, and during the demonstrations of various rally cars on the makeshift stage there, we saw this subtly modified Skoda, one of the rear engine Skodas. Of course, Skoda was so successful throughout the 1970s and 1980s, getting class wins in the RAC rallies and so on. Now this is a bit of a beauty, classic American time, a cream Chevrolet YWG 311. This particular Chevy dates to 1941. It's got a 5.4 litre engine, subtly lowered, different wheels, but otherwise looking pretty original. And that's just how I like them. A few subtle mods, but not too mad. And how about this? This is I think it's a recreation of the original Batmobile. I wonder what this was based on. Clearly a lot of conversion work has been undertaken there. The original car, the film car, was based on a 55 Lincoln Futura concept car, but I wonder what this car owes its origins to. Now we're down at Gaydon, and this is SSV1, based on the left-hand drive MGB, the safety systems vehicle. This was used to develop various safety proposals in the 1970s, such as airbags, anti-lock brakes. Look at that huge roof mirror offering 120-degree rearward vision, apparently. Now we're off to an evening meet several years ago, and this fantastic little Morris van used to promote Carter's Steam Fair. Look at the horse on the top there, presumably off one of the old gallopers, the old steam-driven rides perhaps. What a great little van that is. Next up we have a Riley 472, just a few subtle mods on this one. The door mirrors are non-original, and the wheels, which look like quite a wide set of the old road style wheels, but that looks very nice indeed, possibly slightly lowered suspension as well, but I do like that. That'd make a great daily driver, I'm sure. And talking of modified cars, here we have an Opel Manta. This is in the Rothmans livery, reminiscent of the cars that rallied back in the 1980s. What a stunning car that is. And regular viewers of Top Gear back in the Clarkson, Hammond and May years may well remember this somewhat modified XJS converted to run on a railway line of all things. What an incredible car that is. And yeah, just going through the photographs, there were quite a few modified XJSs that were all potential candidates for this video. Now we have RPC2. This is the famous Stove Bolt Special. This car started out as a Formula 2 HWM single-seater and was later rebuilt and modified, now incorporating a Chevrolet V8 engine. So that's a great looking and great sounding car. And wow, what do we have here? A Morris Minor 752X UK. If we check the DVLA site, this has an 1140cc engine. It dates to 1950, the car, and I think that engine, which required that different front end, is out of a Morris 10, so I'm not quite sure why that conversion would have even been undertaken. And here we have a mildly modified Trabant of all things. What a bonkers looking car that is. Clearly used for a bit of rally work, either for rally training or demonstrations. I'm not quite sure what the story is with this old Trabi from the mid-1980s. If you know, let me know in the comments please. Now here's a bit of a rarity, the modified Ford Cortina Mark II, the Savage. These were dreamt up by Jeff Uren, the racer, the saloon car racer of the day, and these had the Essex V6 engine shoved under the bonnet. So yeah, a bit of a wolf in sheep's clothing, these particular cars. You don't see these all too often. Maybe that one's been restored now. Now this is an incredible Citroen. This is a combination of Citroen DS made into a convertible, but with the Citroen SM, the Maserati engine installed into it. So yeah, that's a very, very interesting car indeed. Here we have a mildly race-prepared ACA Seeker. This is one of my youthful assistant's favourite cars of all, and if he had deep enough pockets when he's older, I'm sure one of these will be in his garage because he loves the AC Seekers, even more than the open-top AC Ace. And totally different, but also very modified, we have this. We've got a side-on view of a Mini Clubman-based camper, of all things. If you know what the story is of this particular vehicle, let me know. Did it start out as a van, or perhaps an estate on a slightly longer wheelbase compared to the car version anyway? Here we have 581 VPU, a very, very smart Ford Anglia 105E on mini lights, slightly lowered, got some nice period fog lights on the front there as well. I quite like modifications when they use in-period parts. Those are the best modified cars of all, personally, I think. And this is a bit of an unusual one. Looks like a Hillman Avenger, but actually badged up as a Sunbeam 1600 GT. So that's a bit of an interesting car, clearly prepared with rallying in mind. Whether this is a recent conversion or a car that was rallied back in the 1970s, I'm not quite sure, but certainly a very interesting car. And look at this, a modified Volvo P1800S. You don't often see these on wire wheels, and it's been debumpered as well. Quite a snazzy paint job, so yes, that's a very interesting car. What's the story with this one? Has it been prepared for the Keep GTS racing, as the signs in the background might suggest? Now, at the January 2024 Bicester Heritage Scramble, amongst the many, many interesting cars on display, was this a JPS liveried Austin A30 Racer. What is the story with this particular car, I wonder? And next up we have a Saab. This is an interesting car. This is a Saab 96 with a V4 engine, but it's been turbocharged. I think this one appears in one or two of the walk around videos we've done on the old classic car channel, and there are some peeks under the bonnet of the incredible turbo installation on this particular car. And here we have an early Mini, a Crayford converted Mini no less. Occasionally you see the Heinz 57 Wolseley Hornet convertibles, and I think one of those will feature later in this compilation, but here we've got a Mini. This must be unique, surely. Wowzers, I remember these in the 1970s. I think I had a poster of one of these somewhere in my room back then. The incredible broad-speed prepared Jaguar V12, the XJ12 race cars. These were just incredible. Not always reliable, but when they were going, they went very, very well. And here we have a mildly modified Morris Ital. This was sort of the facelifted, updated version, of course, of the Morris Marina. This one has period Wolf Race alloy wheels on it, just to set it apart from all the other Itals that you see driving around now. That's a very rare sight, actually. Now we're over at Alton Park, and we're looking down upon an immaculately prepared, race-prepared MGB Roadster, complete with factory hardtop. Carrying on this look at modified classic cars, we have this, one of several 2CVs at the Autos de France meet at Alton Park, and this has one of those boot extensions, a bit like that Mini that we saw before, but this is the 2CV equivalent of, giving it a much, much larger and more practical boot space, perhaps at the cost of the overall appearance. Next up we have a Morris Oxford MO. These originally had the side valve engine similar to that in the Morris J-type van, but this one had been upgraded to the later BMC B-Series engine, a 1622 engine. So that is actually probably quite a worthwhile mod, I would have thought. Visually it looked exactly the same, and the mods are in keeping for the age of the car. Okay, we're back to Morton Hampstead Motor Museum, and a much modified MGC, very much in the style of the old MGC GTS race cars of the late 1960s. Really, really cool looking car, that, and I bet that sounds fantastic. Okay, but over to Opel now, and we have a Cadet, one of the Opel Cadet C-Series coupes. We've got a bit of a different front end there, and a little spoiler attached as well, different wheels. So a few subtle mods there. I'm not quite sure what the spec is under the bonnet, but if you know, pop a note into the comments, please. Now we have a Mark II Austin A40, and this one has been converted into a van by panelling in the rear side windows. The factory did actually produce a few van versions of the A40, but those that were built, I think, all went for export, so they were never actually sold here. So I think this is a recreation of what might have been, if you like. Okay, now we have a Mark I Ford Fiesta. subtly modified, slightly lowered Ford RS alloy wheels, I think they probably are. And this dates to the late 1970s or the beginning of the 1980s. But yeah, very clean looking car. I do quite like that. Now we're back down at Gaydon, the British Motor Museum, and we've got Rob 430, this incredible prototype convertible version of the Austin A30. That's an early A30 with a slightly smaller grille and a little winged badge above the grille. That is the AS3. Look how deep the sills are on this particular car compared to a saloon. Now we were over in Northwich one day and we spotted this incredible modified Land Rover Discovery. It's a fairly early disco. And yeah, has it been converted? I'm not sure. Is it a camper or some sort of promotional vehicle? I seem to remember there were jerry cans strapped to the back of it, so I'm not quite sure what the story is, but it's certainly an eye-catching car. Now this is one I had many years ago. I dragged this out of an old tin shed in 2009. It had been sat there since 1959. It's an Austin 7 Special, and I really wish I'd hung on to this one. It's an incredible car. Austin 7 chassis, modified Ulster body, and a cut down swallow front. Now we have another modified XJS. This incredible two-tone car has a hatchback conversion, no less. And how practical is that? I'm not quite sure where that particular tailgate came from. I've seen a few different modified XJSs over the year, but this one was really well finished. Now here's an interesting one. This is a Ford Anglia stroke Thames van. I think it's got either the fleet spec Anglia front or the van front, but the body, which has been the windows have been panelled in, but I think it's actually an Anglia estate, because the proper vans, the 307Es, were a different shape altogether. Okay, we've got Mini, the SRV4 here, another one of those safety research vehicles that BL came up with in the 1970s. It's got impact bumpers, slightly longer wheelbase, and a safety front end on it. Again, just experimenting with all different ways of making their cars safer. Nice modified BMW here, very, very nice. A BMW Alpina C1 with a 2.3 litre engine, and this is based on the old E21 BMW 3 Series, and the very modified Ford Escort parked alongside it as well, this down at Bicester Heritage. Okay, we're back down to the NEC Classic Car Show, and we've got 462 PBJ, a lovely Sunbeam Alpine Harrington, the fastback conversion to the regular Sunbeam Alpine. Made it a very, very handsome car, but of course you lose the option of having soft top motoring. But yeah, very handsome looking job. Okay, this reminds me very much of the Spitfire that I featured at the beginning of this compilation, another 2.5 litre Triumph Spitfire. And looking at the angle of those rear wheels, I'm guessing this one also has the Rotoflex rear suspension, which got rid of the tail-happy waywardness of the very early Heralds and Spitfires. Now this is a really unusual car. This is a Portuguese conversion of an A35 van, making it into the equivalent of the Countryman, the Estate, but unusually these have wind-down rear side windows, which is something that makes it look very different to the Countryman version that was sold here. So this is almost unique in this country, I would have thought. Okay, we're back to Alton Park, JVO 211, a modified, lowered example of a probably just post-war Vauxhall 12 or 14. Very small diameter wheels on it, so yeah, it's certainly different. Well, this is an incredible car. This lives not too far from us as far as I know. BS 9469, a 1913 Chalmers. Very, very cool. Just post-Edwardian speedster. What an amazing looking car that is. It's well worth looking at that registration just to read a little bit more about the build of this car. Now we're back to Top Gear cars, and this is James May's Triumph Herald that was adapted to sail across the Channel, if I remember correctly. I'm not sure it was entirely successful, but yeah, certainly one of the more unusual Triumph Heralds I've seen over the years. Okay, now we have another modified Mini. This one with a Lotus twin cam engine of all things. What an incredible conversion that is, with two hefty air cleaners stuck out of the front end there. Are they Webers, twin Webers or twin Delortos? I'm assuming they're Webers. What an incredible looking car that is. I bet that really rocks. Okay, we're down at Shelsley Walsh, and we have a race prepared Rover SD1 in the Bastos livery. I seem to remember these racing in the 1980s. And this one is just going up to the line for a run up the Shelsley Walsh hill climb. Okay, SNX 891 is next. A Series 1 Land Rover. This is 1955 landed, driven from London to Singapore. This is a really interesting old vehicle, and there's a book actually written all about the experience of taking this back over there and driving it all the way back again. So that's definitely worth looking at. And we are back at Carfest many years ago, and a Herbie replica 6-volt VW Beetle. How about this? I think this was at the Eccleshaw show that we photographed this one. A much modified Morris Marina Coupe. All sorts of interesting modifications on this one, but look at that special tuning boot lid with the built-in little bib spoiler on it. I have never ever seen one of those before, so just to have a look at that was a real treat. Okay, now we have the Range Rover, the Townley convertible version. Apparently this was sold new to Roger Taylor, the drummer in Queen, no less, and I think it's had several owners since then. But yeah, certainly an interesting car. And another Triumph Herald. This is a 4-door prototype Triumph Herald, because of course all the regular Heralds that were sold were all 2 doors. Apart from in India, there were 4-door versions built over there. There was the standard Herald Mark III, later the standard Gazelle, which were 4-door versions specific to the Indian market. Okay, now we have much modified Mini. This is the ERA Mini Turbo. These were built in limited numbers in the mid-1980s, and this is one of the rare survivors. There were only a few colours. I think it was green, red, and possibly black as well. There weren't too many colours available for these, but yeah, a lot of fun. Apologies for the quality of this particular photo, but I definitely wanted to include this one here. A very modified Rover P5B camper, no less. I wonder what the story is with this one. When was this conversion undertaken? I'd love to know a bit more about this particular car. We are back to Mr. Heritage and a race-prepared TWR Jaguar XJS, continuing in many ways in the wheel tracks of the Broadspeed XJ12 that featured before in this particular collection. These are great looking cars and they sound phenomenal. I think there is a video somewhere on here of a race-prepared XJS being revved up. Okay, and back down to Goodwood now, the Goodwood Revival. And we have a standard Vanguard 6 race car here. Not perhaps the obvious choice for saloon car racing, but very welcome to see something different amongst all the Jaguar Mark IIs and Lotus Cortinas. This was a really interesting Morris Minor MM that turned up at an evening meets just a couple of years ago. Look at that engine, it has an Alta overhead valve conversion. This was one of the side valve cars originally, but it's got this super rare Alta conversion with twin SU carburetors as well, so it's a real treat. And with the bonnet now, you would never guess all these mods under the bonnet. And here another Top Gear vehicle from a later incarnation of Top Gear, based on what would appear to be a Bedford CF ice cream van. I think this was the Chris Evans era of Top Gear. And we're over at Alton Park on the skid pan area, and a slightly modified MX-5 Mark I being given a bit of welly rear around the greasy surface, lowered, different wheels, stripes and a boot spoiler as well, so I wonder what engine mods there are. It's a very tunable engine, that little twin cam. Now we're over at Woodford at Avro Heritage, and a stunning Shelby Accessories livid Ford Ranchero. That's quite a cool looking vehicle, and alongside it's a much modified hot rod pickup. That's a Chevrolet, isn't it, with that wraparound windscreen. Now we have a modified Morris Minor here, debumpered, extra lights on the front, looking quite sporty, and you don't often see them on wire wheels. I forget what car these wheels came from, possibly a Midget or an MGB. I think they were slightly larger diameter than your regular Minor wheels. And here we've got quite a cool conversion of a mini pickup, the Batman Special Ice Cream Van version. What an incredible looking vehicle that is. Super high roof on it so that the person selling the ice creams could actually stand up in the back. So you needed a much taller roof line than was available with the regular minivan. This is an incredible vehicle. GK363, a Talbot 70 ambulance. This used a modified chassis of that used on the 1445 saloon apparently. Just a few of these were made and very few of them survive. This may even be the sole survivor. Now we are at the Pardon Hairpin at the Prescott Hill Climb, and a very, very fruity sounding and fruity looking MG here. I'm not quite sure what the spec is of this particular car, but it certainly sounded phenomenal. Looking at the size of the wheels and tyres on the back of that one, it certainly means business. And talking about meaning business, we've got BNB 615B here. This is a Series 2A Landy, the Forest Rover, designed to go pretty much anywhere, complete with winch on the front. This was one year at Goodwood they had a huge display of unusual versions of the Land Rover. And how about this, a very, very unusual version of the Austin Maxi. This was rallied in period and continues to do so to this day. But yeah, not perhaps the obvious choice to go rallying with, but clearly this one was chosen and it's been used for many, many years for that role. Now we are down at the Aldridge Transport Museum, and an ice cream van based on the Austin A40 of the early to mid 1950s. Stop me and buy one. There's a bit of JDM for you, a bit of classic Japanese metal, PVL 882V. This is a Toyota Corolla Coupe, a 1600cc car of about 1979. Very, very wide wheels, but otherwise looks reasonably standard. Here's a lovely little Porsche 356 Coupe now, registration VKA 527, a 356 Coupe. This one shows as being off the road at the moment, perhaps for the winter. It dates to 1956 and clearly gets used for a bit of historic rallying. VOD 854K next. This is a 1971 Morris van that's been converted into a pop-up roof camper van. That looks very, very practical indeed, and just perfect for having a brew up at a weekend classic car rally perhaps. Spotted in France was this, a Renault 4. Clearly there's been a few modifications there. Looks like it gets used for, I'm not quite sure, maybe charity runs or something like that. Now we're back down at Prescott Hill Climb on a different day, and we have three Reliant Scimitars, the SE Ford Scimitar GTs, the forerunner or the predecessor to the Scimitar GTEs, and I think these are great looking cars, really, really sharp looking coupes. Now we've got a much modified Austin A40 here. This one started out as a regular A40 Countryman, and it's been given a one-piece hatchback conversion, very similar to those that Innocenti built. Innocenti in Italy built license-built versions of the A40s with a lift-up hatchback just like this. It made it a lot more practical, I think. Okay, NMM 97 now. This is an MGB, believe it or not, with the WSM conversion. And there is a page on the old Classic Car website all about this particular car. During the Mini celebrations in 2019 at Gaydon, there were loads of interesting versions, and this 442FON Austin Mini Beach Car. Quite a groovy looking machine, complete with wicker seats no less. I wonder how many of these were built. This is an interesting old Lanchester LA10. Now, was this built from new as a woody, or is it a much modified saloon? Quite often saloons will be cut down and made into woodies and vans and pickups, so I'm not quite sure what the story is with this one, but it's such an unusual car, I had to feature it here. Probably the one-off even back then. Okay, now I promised you the VW Beetle that was parked alongside the Frog Eye Sprite, and here it is. A very, very modified VW Beetle. What a bonkers looking car that is. Clearly the gentleman that owned this and the Frog Eye was a huge exponent of car modifications, and it's great that these two have survived together and are now on display in that museum. Okay, now we've got a Renault 4CV, a car very close to my own heart, and this one has a Renault 5 engine shoehorned into the back of it. So a very modified car. Externally, you wouldn't really guess there'd been any changes, but lift the bonnet up, and yes, it looks very, very different indeed. Now we're over at Alton Park on a test day, and there was this ADU 1D. It looks like a GT6, but a search of that registration number reveals that this was actually a Spitfire Mark II originally, before being very, very modified into what you see here, very reminiscent of the old Works Le Mans cars. Now, we saw the Crayford Mini convertible before, and this is the related Wolseley Hornet convertible, the Heinz convertible. There it says, one of 57 built by Crayford, and they were prizes offered out by Heinz Foods, no less. You can see a bit of information on the board there. Now we're back to classic Triumphs again, and a much modified Mark III Triumph Spitfire that turns up at many of the events that we go to now. This one has the fastback Ashley roof on it, and is gradually being modified as and when time permits. Every time we see it, there's something changed on it. Now this is a bit of a rarity, a Datsun Bluebird, I think it is, Datsun Bluebird saloon car racer. This was spotted at a different test day at Alton Park, and yeah, that's quite an unusual sight in this country. Still quite a few modified classics to go, and here we have an AMG modified S-Class Mercedes of the 1980s. This is one of the SELs, the long wheelbase Mercedes, but look at the wheels and the body kit and the spoiler on the back. These were very popular in the 1980s. AMG, and there was Zender as well, they did body kits. Okay, back to 1965 now, and there's competition prepared, Hillman Imp, slightly lower suspension, mini-light wheels, wider at the back compared to the front. I love the checkerboard roof as well, and the big CBA lamps on the front, so that's a very purposeful looking little historic rally car, great stuff. And we are back to modified cars as used on BBC Top Gear. This, a Nissan pickup complete with outboard motors on the back, again designed with amphibious use in mind. We're back to classic ice cream vans here, and this started out life I think as a Thames 307E van, and has been converted into the ice cream van, the Lions Made ice cream van that you see here. How cool is that? Another modified XJS. This incredible car is the Lister Le Mans. Look at this big engine, I think it's about 7 litres, something like that, the V12, flared arches, huge wheels, and that just looks fantastic, I think. Back to classic minis here, 977 ARX, a Morris Cooper S, lowered mini lights, extra lamps, and being driven here by legendary rally driver Rauno Aaltonen, no less. This was at Race Retro just a year or two back. A somewhat modified two-door Cortina here, TND 876K, that will be a late 71 or early 1972 car, blacked out windows, different wheels. Yes, it's had quite a few modifications, that particular car. Would you like this, or would you rather a standard version? Let me know. And we're at Race Retro again. We've got PPX 790. This is a gentleman's rally car of the 1950s, a Daimler Conquest from 1954. That's rallying in comfort if ever I've seen it. Looking very purposeful here as an evening car meets VFF 959, the Triumph TR4, the 2.2 litre 4-cylinder TR. This one from 1962. It's been debumpered, got much later wheels on it, and a pair of lovely lamps on the front as well. So I'm not sure about the wheels, but the rest of it looks great. Now, at first glance, you think this is an early 1970s Porsche 911, but this actually dates to 1990. It's one of these Restomod cars based on a much later 911, but made to look like an older one. But it certainly sounded very, very nice indeed when it drove around the paddock here at Alton Park just a couple of years ago. Now we're back down to Bicester Heritage, early 2024. If you've seen a video, you'll remember this car, a Speedster Ford Model T. That'll certainly wake you up on a chilly Sunday morning. How about this Carfest at Cholmondeley Castle in, I think, about 2012, something like that. And this is an ISO Revolta GT from 1964. What a handsome machine that is. You very, very rarely see these anywhere, so it's a real treat to see this slightly modified example. And this is a car we've seen a couple of times in recent months, or years rather. We saw this in North Wales at a classic car show, and this is in Llandudno, a convertible version of the Ford 100e Anglia. Definitely an interesting car. I'm sure I featured this one in the Wales video of 2022. Okay, now much modified Rover P6, the V8, modified and used by a police force, no less. This one on an end plate, which dates it to late 74 or early 1975, and that is certainly a view you wouldn't want in your rear view mirror while driving around in the 1970s. And here, at first glance, looks like a regular Ford Zodiac Mark II, but the little RM badge just at the far end of the grille tells us this has the Raymond Mays engine conversion. Reworked cylinder head, 6-cylinder engine of course, triple carburetors, and yeah, a bit of a wolf in sheep's clothing, this particular beauty. And the same goes for this one as well, a Wolseley Hornet, but as you may have seen in previous videos that I've done, this has a Mercedes SLK supercharger fitted to it. And if you check out some of the videos I've done at Combermere, the Old Piggery Cafe meets, you'll see the installation with the bonnet up, and it really is a very neat job indeed. And how about this? Staying with mini-based vehicles, we've got a mini pickup here. I'm not quite sure what engine spec this was. I think it had a 1480 in it. It was a bit of a restoration project when I photographed it here, but it had a very lumpy sounding engine in it, so it had a fairly wild cam. Has it been restored now, I wonder? Now we have a lovely Triumph TR3A, Len 898 is the registration. We've got some lovely Lucas lamps with covers on the front there, and another Lucas lamp in the middle of the hardtop, which presumably can be angled from the passenger seat to illuminate signposts at night during a night rally. Now we are back down out to Bicester Heritage, and this is the Marina, the Mumford convertible conversion to a Marina Coupe. And what a rare car that is, really, really unusual. Those Dunlop alloy wheels as well, just for a bit of added 70s charm. And wow, well look at this, a very, very modified Ford Model T, presumably designed to be used by the military somewhere. Is this an original vehicle that's been restored, or one that's been built up to look like a vehicle that would have been available 100 or so years ago? Let me know in the comments if you know what the story is behind this one. And how about this? When did you last see a race prepared Jowett Jupiter, no less? Bradford's finest. This one, I'm not quite sure what series this particular car ran in. Is it still being used competitively, or maybe it's been put back to a fast road car? Perhaps this was a few years ago now. And a very modified Humber now. It had a V8 engine, I think it was a Rover V8 engine under its bonnet, big wheels, very, very different looking car. The Everflex roof, or the vinyl roof, suggests it may have started out life as a Humber Imperial, because that was a standard fitment on the top of the range Imperial. Now 7832 PJ and Elva Courier Mark III GT from 1963. This was seen at one of the Donington historic meets quite a few years ago now, and most of the Elvas I've seen are open top, so it's a real treat to see this fastback GT. And look at this magnificent Rolls-Royce 2025 BLE 718 is the registration number. This one started out life as a limousine, later converted into a tourer, which didn't look altogether nice to be honest, and in more recent times it's been converted into this fantastic ice cream van. What an amazing vehicle that is. And how about this? The estate version of the Rover P6, this is the S-Tourer. These were converted and built by FLM Panelcraft. There are a few of them around, but they weren't made in huge numbers. And I guess that roofline does compromise its usefulness slightly, but it does make it into a lot more practical car. Now we're down at a hill climb meeting, and a very, very smartly prepared Lotus Elan. One of the fixed head coupe versions of the Lotus Elan. Looks very, very nice indeed on a G plate, so that puts it at about 1968 or early 69. And yes, we've had a few modified XJS's already, and here is another Top Gear special, Jaguar XJS. I think this one featuring the India special. I haven't looked it up, but I seem to remember that was the one that this particular Jaguar featured in, but yeah, a very modified classic indeed. Talking of very modified classics, look at this funny little speedster type car. I'm guessing this was based on a Ford Pop running gear. Certainly the wheels are Ford Pop, NOV738 is the registration number, so I'm guessing that's what we're looking at here. This was at Llandudno, I believe it was, quite a long time ago now. And a really smartly modified Opel Ascona here. Very rarely see these here in the UK. I think Asconas were sold more often than not abroad and in Germany, of course, but not so many made it to the UK, I think, and very few survive now. Look at this lovely VW. This is a proper Carmen conversion, proper Carmen cabriolet, and very, very nice it is too. I think it may be slightly lowered with Porsche wheels on it, so just a few subtle modifications there. And it just looked really, really nice. A very smartly turned out car. And look at this, another Trabant. Who would have thought Trabants would make it into a modified classic car compilation? But here we have a 1980s military police version of the good old Trabant. I wonder if this is an original vehicle or one that's been converted and modified in more recent times. Now here's an interesting car. At first glance you think, oh, it's an A40 pickup. And, well, that's what it is, kind of. It's got a saloon front end, it's got a proper pickup cab, and then a one-off body that someone has made especially for it. The rear wings look like they're off a Devon saloon, so a bit of everything going on there, but it certainly looked nice. And that interesting little Austin rounds out this look at modified classics. Thank you so much for watching this particular compilation. There are hundreds of videos on the channel now, so please have a look around before you've finished here, and there'll be many, many more videos along very, very soon. So bye for now.